Hey everybody, and welcome to Learning from Smart People. I am your host, Rob Oliver, and today I am joined by Erik Barkley. Erik is the owner of Tugboat Coffee. He has worked in the coffee industry for 15 years and has owned a wholesale coffee roasting company in Addison, Illinois since 2013. It is the oldest wholesale-only specialty coffee roaster in the Chicagoland area. Erik, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Cool. Believe it or not, coffee is actually not my thing. However, two of my kids are coffee nuts. We remodeled our kitchen and we had to put in a coffee bar, and they've got like the Monin pump things, and they've got like my wife, she's a Keurig person because it's simple and you can't mess it up. My son, on the other hand, he's got the espresso machine, the whole thing. So I would love to talk to you about a couple of things. Number one, let's talk about coffee. And number two, I'd love to hear about your business and the way that your business runs, because ultimately what we're looking at, the listeners are a lot of entrepreneurs and folks that are running small businesses. And I think we can all learn from each other. So let's start with kind of, where did Tugboat Coffee come from? Have you always been a coffee person? What drove you to kind of open this as your niche?
Yeah, absolutely. I started in coffee when I was 18 at the University of Florida, working for the big giant Starbucks, and just long enough to start appreciating coffee, and then moved on to independent coffee shops in Gainesville. So that's where it all began, and then decided after I graduated from college that there was nothing else I wanted to do with my life besides coffee. So continued working in coffee, and then my wife dragged me back to Chicago, kicking and screaming, and I just decided to start a business here rather than go back to work for somebody else. So,
I've been to Gainesville, and there's a big difference between Gainesville and Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel your pain on that.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at coffee, most people, I imagine when you say coffee, the first thing that pops into their mind is Starbucks or, something along those lines. I know McDonald's talks about the wonderful coffee that they make. And somehow I'm thinking there's like these big chains, these big conglomerates that are all doing, in some ways, roughly the same thing. But tell me what it is that an independent coffee roaster is able to do that's different than the big chains.
The primary differentiating factor would be the roast level, in my opinion. So independent coffee shops generally focus on lighter roasts, which is the opposite of Starbucks. So Starbucks is all dark roast. There's nothing that resembles a light roast that Starbucks produces, including their blonde roast. So that's still darker than pretty much anything that we roast as a specialty coffee roaster. So that's generally how the independents are separating themselves, is just pretty much based on the roast level, the attention to detail. The equipment that they're using is also a major factor. So the big chains have all moved to push button, super automatic machines. The independent market is still primarily automatic or even manual machines with paddles. So it requires a lot more skill, art, and work to produce a cup of coffee at an independent coffee shop compared to a big chain. So big chains are literally just push button. The computers are figuring everything out. So it takes all the guesswork, all the manual labor out of it. But you also get a mediocre shot of espresso that way. So if somebody is really skilled on an espresso machine, you have a very hands-on manual machine, you can calibrate it on a moment-by-moment basis to produce the best shot of espresso that you can get.
I think it's so interesting. What I'm hearing you talk about is like, it's becoming a coffee craftsman, so to speak, right? Because I don't want to overstate this, but like you go to any Starbucks and their emphasis is on basically consistency, where you get the same product. It's not terrible. It's not like, I mean, it's good, but when you have somebody who is a craftsman and who knows the difference. Now, maybe you can explain this to me. Difference between light roast and dark roast. I'm assuming it has something to do with how long it's roasted, or what is the difference?
Not necessarily. Generally, dark roast is roasted longer, but it's not direct correlation. But it's the final roasting temperature. So the final temperature of the bean determines how dark it is. The main difference is that throughout the process of roasting, you're breaking down sugars, making them soluble. And then as you get darker and darker, you're caramelizing the sugars until you actually start carbonizing the sugars and actually burning the sugars. So a lot of people say that a dark roast tastes burnt. That's actually the burnt sugars they're tasting. So they're not wrong. So you're balancing the amount of soluble sugar, caramelization, and burnt sugar throughout the roast process. And that would be the difference between a light, medium, dark. You also have a small difference in caffeine content from light roast to dark roast. And it's the exact opposite of what everyone would anticipate. It's actually a lighter roast has more caffeine than a dark roast, but it's a trivial amount. It's about 1% different from a really light roast to a really dark roast. So it's not enough to make you want to switch your habits, just to try to get a little bit more caffeine. But
okay, so I'm also hearing you say that it shows up in the taste. That's ultimately the difference between a light roast and a dark roast. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, exactly. So a light roast is going to be a lot sweeter, fruitier, generally, or it's going to have a lot more subtle flavors, a lot of nuances. Just like any bottle of wine, the terroir will impact the quality and the flavor of the coffee. So you can have the exact same varietal, exact same species, processed the exact same way from Brazil or Ethiopia, and they'll taste entirely different just based on the soil content, the amount of cloud cover, the rainfall. So everything that goes into that coffee will be really evident in a light roast. In a dark roast, all of those variables are essentially removed. So a dark roast would be the same thing as a flank steak or a filet mignon. If you burn both of them, flank steak and filet mignon are essentially going to taste the same. So it makes sense for really big coffee companies that are trying to be really consistent to do a dark roast because all the coffees will taste very similar. It also is significantly easier to roast coffee in the dark roast format than it is in the light roast. So.
Okay, that makes so much sense, because the people that are going to Starbucks, every Starbucks that they go to, and I'm sorry to keep referencing them.
Oh, no worries.
Every time that they go in, they want to get the same thing. And
Right.
That's obviously what they're striving for, as opposed to when you're going to that specialty independent coffee shop, there is the flavor of the day. And the flavor of the day, again, from what your information is largely influenced by where the beans have come from and what the conditions are. And it's based on the beans, not on the desired end product. Where Starbucks, the big chains are driven by, we want to get the same end product all the time. And the independents are saying, we want to make the beans speak for themselves. Is that
correct? Yeah. Another large factor would be the amount of time the green coffee, it's green before it's roasted. So the green coffee is sitting in inventory before it's roasted. So generally, independent small specialty coffee roasters are working on a 12-month basis at the most. Some coffees we do a 6-month basis on. So we're roasting it as close to the harvest date as possible. So if you're doing a light roast, acidity is really prized. Acidity and sweetness both fade the further from harvest date that the coffee is. So the really big companies generally work on 2 to 4 years worth of green inventory, where all that sweetness and acidity is faded as well. But in a dark roast, again, that doesn't matter because you're taking all the sweetness and acidity out of the coffee. So there's a bunch of variables that go into creating a really outstanding light roast that they don't have to consider at all.
Understood. Fascinating. Okay. And you mentioned that you're getting coffee from Brazil, from Ethiopia. Are those the two major places that coffee's coming from, or where else are people growing coffee? And if you don't mind, kind of a subsequent question to that is, as coffee is coming from different places, how does that affect the flavor profile that you're getting from it?
That's an awesome question. So yeah, all coffee is grown between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. So it's all grown around the equator. And the closer you are to the equator, the higher the elevation you have to go to get quality coffee. So Mexico, you can actually get really good coffee from a much lower elevation. Ecuador, Kenya, you have to go much higher into the mountains to produce good coffee. So Brazil's the largest producer of Arabica. So a majority of the Arabica coffee is coming from Brazil. East Africa is my favorite place to source coffee. So I source a lot of coffees from East Africa. Central America is a big player. And then Indonesia has some very unusual practices in harvesting, processing, and unusual flavor profiles that also make it a fairly prominent origin for specialty coffee as well.
Okay. And with a lot of the dark roast coffee, I'm assuming they're putting flavor into it, right? They make the coffee has the same flavor, and then they're adding flavor to it to make it different. With the different way that the beans or the different way that the coffee is roasted and the different origin of the beans, are you having to add as much external flavor, or is the flavor of the beans really something that drives the drink rather than what you're adding to it?
So if you're doing light roasts, yeah, they're going to have significantly different flavor profiles. We don't do any added flavors to coffee. There are coffee roasters that add flavor into the coffee. Our coffee is just simply the flavors that are in the coffee when it's grown and processed. So in terms of like flavoring on the milk-based side, the lattes, cappuccinos, that's a whole different story. But yeah, flavored coffee roasters are generally using much lesser quality coffees that have very subtle flavors that can be easily overcome by the chemical alcohol-based flavors. But that's an entire separate industry that essentially eliminates you from working in the specialty coffee industry. So anybody that jumps into specialty coffee is essentially there's no way they can work with flavored. Otherwise, they'll be an outcast from the community. So,
got it. Well, yeah, the last thing that you need to do is in a select community like that, be the one who's on the outside.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, you talked about the fact that you're working on a 6 to 12 month basis between harvesting and roasting, and then what happens then between roasting and brewing? Is there a difference between, for different types of coffee that some should be done, some need to sit, some need to be done immediate? Like, how does that work with the difference between, or the time between roasting and brewing?
Yeah, it's an awesome question because there's a lot of debate over this. The easiest answer is that espresso, any coffee that you're planning on using for an espresso machine should sit for a week after it's roasted. A well-roasted coffee can be used immediately for drip coffee. You don't have to, there's no resting period if you're using it for drip. The extraction ratios are really the only difference. So the longer coffee sits, the more solids you'll extract out of the coffee. And that really only applies to espresso since it's such a short time frame. You're trying to extract all the solids in 25 seconds rather than drip, which is 5 minutes. So the solubility after a week is significantly higher than it would be immediately after roasted. But again, it doesn't matter for drip coffee.
Got it. What I don't know about coffee apparently is a book that you could write, and it would be a large book, because I find this interesting. This is amazing. And this is actually the reason why I'm doing this show, is learning from smart people. You are a coffee expert, and it's fantastic. So let me ask this then. Do you only have the store, like a mail order store or a kind of a independent roaster? Do you also have like a cafe or a place where folks can come and get coffee?
No, so we're the only retail that we do is through our website. Otherwise, we're entirely wholesale. So we have an entire coffee shop built into the roastery for training purposes. and for my own guilty pleasures, but that's the only the closest resemblance we have to a coffee shop. So we do tours for coffee shops that are looking for coffee roasters, or with our current coffee shops, we do tours with their staff and do training and education here as well.
So basically what I'm hearing you say is that you are not the coffee shop to Chicago area, but you are a coffee shop to the world, where anybody can get on your website and get, and it's tugboatcoffee.com, right?
Yep.
Okay. Let me ask this. Where did you come up with the name Tugboat Coffee? What inspired that?
It's a kind of a twisted answer, but we named one of our dogs Tugboat. It was a little fluffy pug, and we named him after my family, because almost everybody in my family works on tugboats, riverboats, everything around Chicago. The Chicago Fireboat is one of the captains, my uncle. So our whole family is connected to the water downtown Chicago. So we named the dog that. The dog inspired the name for the roastery. So
that's awesome. Tell me a little bit about what are some secrets that you would say are the secrets to making great coffee?
I believe that the largest factor is focus on a very particular area. So throughout the coffee industry, there are very unique skill sets, and those skill sets aren't generally skill sets that you can apply to different areas of the coffee industry. So we have importers that work just with the farms, that are going down to the farms and inspecting the harvesting, processing throughout the year. We occasionally go down to the farms as well, more just for fun than anything else. But and then coffee roasting is absolutely a full-time job from week to week. You're taking into account all the changes in the ambient temperature, pressure, humidity, and trying to make adjustments to create the most consistent coffee possible. And then running a coffee shop is absolutely a full-time, all hands on deck job. That's my opinion. I believe that all three of those things, or growing coffee as well, are very independent, separate businesses that demand 100% of your attention.
Got it. Okay. Having to go down to something that's between the Tropic of Capricorn and Cancer and check out what's going on there occasionally, I would especially think that sometime around February in Chicago, that would be a great time to go see what's going on with the coffee growers.
Yeah, and that fortunately is generally the harvest time down in Central America. So yeah, it's a perfect time to go down there. Eventually, when I can step away from the business a little bit, we'll probably be living in one of those countries. So
fantastic. So tell me then a little bit. You were working for the big corporate company who's doing coffee. Coffee becomes your passion. What was it that inspired you, or what was the first thing that you did when you decided to make this your own company and do your own thing?
The long answer is that I chose to go to the University of Florida for marine biology, and after I was in school there, I realized how difficult it was to make a living as a marine biologist. So I desperately started searching for a different career job set, and I majored in marketing while still getting my minor in ichthyology. Fortunately, I found the exact same passion for coffee that I did in the marine environment. So I didn't want to make the same mistake twice. To this day, I think leaving marine biology was probably a mistake. So I just poured everything into coffee at that point. My education was really just an afterthought, unfortunately. But I just was working around the clock in coffee shops, managing coffee shops. And then the coffee shop that I was working for bought a roaster, just kind of on a whim, just decided to start testing out roasting on their end. So I just moved into that position. And then from there, it was was a wrap. I couldn't see myself doing anything else.
How much of your marketing degree do you use with your business?
I would, my gut answer is that I use very little. I'm sure there's some benefits out of having a college degree at this point, but almost everything I do in my business is just purely a gut instinct. I don't really follow any historical precedents for anything I do. I just do what feels right to me. So.
Okay. How do folks find out about you? Like, is it word of mouth? Is it, I'm assuming that the quality of the material that you're putting out there is something that people are going to say, like, this is great coffee. How do I get this for myself? Or how else do people learn about you?
Yeah, we do a lot of essentially just cold calling. That is really the most effective sales tool. So all the marketing materials in the world can't make up for face-to-face interaction. So that's how we do majority of our sales calls. For the last year or two, it's pretty much been all word of mouth. So we have a large enough presence in the Chicagoland area that when a new coffee shop's opening, we're one of the first calls. So we're really fortunate in that regard. But then we stopped accepting new customers last year because we just reached capacity at our facility. So we have a new machine that was supposed to be here this month. That's not actually gonna be here until October now, but everything got shut down in Germany for a little while. But we're gonna be expanding capacity again in October. So we've allowed ourselves to double our capacity with the new machine. So.
All right. So if somebody is going onto your website and they're ordering roasted coffee, do you have a suggestion as this is something that you've got to try because it is just so amazingly different than any cup of coffee that you've ever had before?
Yeah, in terms of different coffees, we'll have a Kenyan coffee available soon. That is always my favorite coffee. If a Kenyan coffee has a AA rating, it's just a difference between really good or like the best coffee you've had in your life. They're all incredible. But in terms of like just a crowd pleaser or Guatemalan coffee, there's nobody that doesn't like Guatemalan coffee. You could take the most sophisticated coffee drinker all the way down to somebody that uses Keurigs, and they're both going to be incredibly happy with Guatemalan coffee. So that would actually be my real recommendation. Kenya is very unusual, very sweet, like raspberry, winey flavors. So that doesn't appeal to some coffee drinkers.
Got it. So you've given us two different options. Yeah, your marketing degree is coming into play there because I see it at work. Yeah. So as you were growing your business, what is one thing that you did that you think is possibly the smartest thing that you did to grow your business?
I believe that focusing just on wholesale rather than focusing on retail and wholesale was the best decision I made. Now with the quarantine and almost all of our customers closing their doors temporarily, it's made me second guess that decision, but we've doubled down actually and decided to use this time to really focus on expanding our capacity and catering more towards wholesale so that when everything comes back on the opposite end, we'll be even better prepared to continue with our business model. But that is hands down up to quarantine, the best decision we've made.
So it's finding your niche and making the most of it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Hey, so if people are looking to find you, where can they find you on the web?
Tugboatcoffee.com. We have social media, but it's checked maybe once a month. So social media is not a great place to reach out to us, but our general email is info@tugboatcoffee.com and our website is tugboatcoffee.com.
Great. I hope a lot of folks go visit there. You know, I have to tell you that you've made me reconsider the possibility of doing coffee. Because listen, for me, drinking coffee, it tastes burnt. Like the flavor of coffee it's not something that really appealed to me. But when you're talking about the different way that it's roasted, I drank coffee to stay awake. Like that was it. And on kind of a side note, my mom was going through a rough time with her health. And so coffee became the way that she and I connected. I would make coffee ostensibly for the two of us in the morning before I went to school. I would take her cup of coffee to her. I would have mine and I would leave. And I never actually drank the whole cup of coffee. By the time that I got to the bus stop, I had dumped it out and threw the cup away. But if you're talking about something that has a sweetness to it, an aroma, a flavor, a bouquet of essence, or whatever it is, that sounds a lot more interesting to me than what I was drinking. So you've opened my eyes and opened my possibilities.
Tea has all of the exact same qualities and process, and you can dive just as deep into tea as you can coffee. So I have nothing wrong with drinking tea. I have to actively avoid learning too much about tea, because you can run down the same rabbit hole you can with coffee. So there's only so much space in my brain that I can occupy with tea.
Beautiful. All right. So you have established that you are smart. I have learned from you. It is time for 3 questions to establish your humanity. You ready for this?
Good.
All right. Do you think that iced coffee should only be drank in the summer, or should it be all year long?
Year round. I hardly ever drink hot coffee. I always wait for hot coffee to get to room temperature, or put it on ice.
Okay. I told you about my mom drinking coffee. My mom literally will drink the same cup of coffee all day long, but she puts it in the microwave.
Okay. That's a big mistake.
For 15 seconds. But then half the time when you go to put something in the microwave, you find out her cup of coffee is still in there from an hour ago that she never got out. So let me ask you this. If there was a movie made of the life of Erik Barkley, who would you like to play you?
Absolutely Mel Gibson, hands down. Before the rants.
Fantastic. And then what is your all-time go-to favorite movie snack? So either if you're going to the movie theater or if you're sitting at home to watch a movie with the family, what's your movie watching snack?
Not a huge fan of movie theater, so it would definitely be at home. Cereal. Incredible amounts of cereal.
All right, and what's the go-to cereal then for you?
Right now it is Power O's, which is like a bean-based cereal. It's absolutely incredible. It sounds a lot better than the name, but I'll go through at least 1 box a night in front of the TV.
That's hilarious. Hey, you know what? They need to appreciate you for it. You need some revenue from like a joint venture with them to say, hey, I'm plugging your cereal here. It's fantastic. Erik, thank you so much for being on the show. I have learned a tremendous amount. I hope that folks go visit you, find out more about you. And you may have convinced me to try coffee again. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So everybody, check him out. It's tugboatcoffee.com. As I said, Erik, appreciate you being on the show. To all of my listeners, thank you for tuning in today. I hope that this has been as enjoyable for you as it has for me. I will remind you all, it's always appreciated when you subscribe, when you follow us on social media, leave us some comments, let us know what you're thinking. And in the meantime, I will remind you that when you stop learning, you stop living. Have a great day, everybody.